Hello, Camp Pros, and welcome to the CampHacker podcast. My name is Joe Richards, and I'm a summer camp professional who manages Pierce Williams Summer Camp and Retreat Facility, which is part of the United Church of Canada's camping network. We are located in Fingal, Ontario, but halfway between Detroit and Toronto, and we try to offer kids the most amazing camp experience possible here at camp. I'd like to introduce our co-host today. So, Chris, tell us about yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Hudson. I am a social worker and the camp director of Camp Highlight, a camp for children who have LGBTQ plus parents. Hi.
And my name is Gabrielle Rail, and I'm one of the camp directors of Camp Waro. Camp Waro is an all-girls camp in the Laurentian Mountains of Quebec, Canada, and we focus on creating a positive female community, and we do that while speaking in French and in English.
That is awesome. We are missing our one of our founders, Travis Allison, today, but we are sure that we can do this on our own. They have left the kids alone to play, and we're totally fine with that.
Get ready.
Oh yeah. We do want to say a big thank you to Matt Hansberger, because this could be a difficult show to edit, and suck it. So.
Here we go. This is how we're starting.
Okay, this week's topic is going to be don't be that boss unless you have to be that boss. So this was a topic that came up, and when I think of this topic, I think of the stories of bosses I hated. I think is that what comes to mind for most people?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's what I'm thinking. I do want to say though, we can all go around and like share our stories and experiences, but let's get a good definition of what that boss is. Because when you say that boss, someone leaps into my mind. I will name 0 names. That's for the after show. But someone leaps into, because there's particular qualities that I think about that boss having, which drive me mad. So Joe, what is the qualities you think when like don't be that boss? Who are you talking about? Not who, but what qualities you're talking about? Let's leave names out of it.
I think one of the big qualities I think of when I think of that boss is just someone who seems disconnected. Like none of their decisions seem to make any sense. And as I remember from being low on the totem pole at camps and in other businesses, I don't always need to know why we're doing something. But if it's a weird thing that doesn't really fit with the job, then you should really just help any employee along. So people who feel disconnected. Gab, what about you? What's one of your big topics?
I'm thinking about a lot of staff members that I meet at conferences and how desperate they are to help their camp grow and put campers first, but their boss or boards get in the way of making some, I would say probably some small adjustments in staff training, staff hiring, even in programming. They don't want to change anything. And it's almost like the wheel was invented and we leave it as is, and they're not taking any stock in what these young professionals have to say. And for me, that's an echo that I hear a lot at conferences when camp professionals come to me and talk to me about some of their frustrations.
And piggybacking off of that, I would say that boss is someone who you can't talk to.
Yeah.
Which is maddening in an organization, because if you are organized around a mission and a vision, you should all be collaborating on that all the time. And that includes like listening to new ideas or just listening to people who work for you. I've been in a lot of environments, people are like, oh, this sounds a great idea, but I'm not going to deal with her, or I'm not going to deal with him. And I was like, well, why are we even here? Like, then this isn't working. That's what that boss is to me. Someone just can't be communicated with. Maybe it's like you say, Gabs, they have like an idea about what they're doing, and they did it 20 years ago. So if it worked in 1999, it should work today, which is ridiculous.
Yeah. And sometimes it's ego too. There's a big ego that comes into play. Either they hadn't thought about it, or they're patronizing, where they'll listen, but nothing changes, saying, that's a great idea, but nothing actually gets done. So it's either way, what I think that boss is somebody that's not paying attention to the needs of the employees and consequently the needs of the clients.
I think the other thing that jumps to my mind is the idea of micromanaging, because a lot of that boss is the person who doesn't let you do your job, right?
Yes.
Or wants to do your job. And micromanaging, I don't think anybody who's worked for me would ever say that I micromanage them. In fact, they'll go to the opposite side where they're like, well, I wanted more direction. And I was like, well, do it on your own, right? Like, just here's the idea and go to it.
This is awkward, but I think it's time I came out of the closet. I'm that boss. I'm so sorry. I am absolutely that boss. I am the micromanaging. It is, and I know it, and I want to stop because everyone doesn't like that guy, you know? But like, you know, it's especially when camping, this is something I've been doing for 20 years. I was a counselor for so long before I was a camp director. Now I get to hire counselors, I see what they're doing. And to resist jumping in and doing it yourself is really a talent. It's a talent and it's a muscle that you have to exercise. Because like I am fully aware that how hard that would be and just how disarming and just how disquieting it is for you to be hired to do something and you have ideas and someone goes, no, sit down, I'll do it. So if you all have any tips on how I could not be that guy, let's hear them. That's what this is about. Because
in that vein, a couple of years ago, I had a longtime camp director for me who went to another camp and came back and spent our last week of the summer with us. And I had never seen her look so tired in her life. And she said that it was because of, you know, the micromanaging, and because she thought she was hired to do one thing. Oh, that's another boss thing. Your job description is not what your job description says on paper, right? And that's part of the micromanaging. And I felt so bad for her because it takes so much energy away from professionals. Even like Gab said, when you ask for something and no change happens, and if you ask 10 times for 10 different things and no change happens, that can be disheartening and really drive you away to look for somewhere else and look for a new boss. Part of research, as I understand it, is that people don't quit companies, people quit bosses, right? People quit their supervisors. And so
very true.
It's like board members, and I love that you brought up board members, Gab, that if you have a high turnover of staff and a high turnover of board members and you're the ED somewhere, there's potential that the problems are with you, not with the other people.
I find that in thinking about it, like, so I guess the challenge is like how not to be that boss. The challenge is that identifying what aspects that we have that are that person and how to guard against them. Because I want to be really clear about something. There are some aspects of that boss, like we keep saying, like capital T, bad capital B, boss. And correct me, but there are some aspects of being that boss that can be helpful. I always feel like it goes a little too far. Like when it comes to micromanaging, which is my thing, which I guard against, there is a degree to which you want to be hands-on. You want to guide and help people. We talked a little bit about this. We talked about mentoring the next generation of camp professionals. You want to be a little hands-on, right? And you have to know when to stop. But especially if you are a new boss, this is always true with new supervisors. When I was a new supervisor, learning how to delegate is its own thing. So like I was going to say, to avoid being that boss, like learning how to delegate, and there's no good book for it really, right? There's no good way to do it other than just putting yourself in the situation, which kind of sucks for everybody that is working under you that first time. So what has your experience been, you two? What has your experience been in sort of like guarding against becoming a terrible, non-communicative, like horrible person boss?
I think the important thing, Chris, is to know what you're being asked to do as a boss,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you have a board, so my camp history is a lot about in the directorship is a lot about being a fixer early on in my career. You're
Mm-hmm.
brought in to fix what board members perceive as a problem at a camp. And so
Mm-hmm.
your job is clearly defined as being a fixer. So it's not important that the staff like me. It's important that the kids have an amazing time and the
Yeah.
staff do their job. And so I think that um, that idea of delegation is one of the hardest tasks to learn. I agree with, and as leaders, we often learn on the job. And I think the best way to avoid becoming that person is to really consistently look at the lessons that every interaction can teach you, right? So when something goes terribly wrong for me, even to this day, and when I say terribly wrong, I mean like you get that feeling like it's wrong, either you're really angry or you shake after the I don't tend to shake before a confrontation, but after the confrontation if it's really serious. And then it can be years of me just replaying that in my mind to figure out, oh, I could have done this and I could have done that and I should do this. And I, I let Chris down by doing this. And so I can't let people down because, so I think that there is no great book. Yeah. What are your thoughts on how not to, how to not become that horrible, awful, no good person?
um, I think that being around camp directors for better part of 15 to 20 years of my life, one of the things that I've noticed in camp directors, a lot of camp directors, is that they tend to be exceptional at a lot of things. They tend to be very good at being on stage and getting people's attention. They tend to be good at writing an email, talking to families, problem solving, emergency situations. And I think when you're that type of person, it's very difficult to relinquish power because you are so good at so many things. And it's frustrating because if you've been doing it for so long, you also know what big of an impact doing something wrong will have in the long term, and that causes a lot of anxiety, I think. And you can see into the future, like this kid's going to have this experience, then they're going to tell their parent, therefore they're going to go home, and then they're not going to come back, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm very privileged with having quite a strong learning difference, and so I really do need a lot of assistance in sort of the mundane stuff, like reading emails, writing emails, understanding the schedule of our camp. Even though I've been here since I'm 11 years old, I still don't really know exactly the schedule, which is why I have a football sort of schedule on my arm, the quarterback, so I can know what I'm supposed to be doing at that time of day. Even my 12-year-olds are like, "Do you know where you're supposed to be right now?" I'm like, "No." What are we doing? They're like, "We're all at the Magic View." I'm like, "Okay, thank you." Um, but I had to overcome as a young professional when I was 20. I think it was about 2021 when I was leading about 16 staff members. I'd show up late to meetings, or I'd forget certain small things. If a staff member would tell me we need to contact a parent, I forget to make that call. This all is attributed to my learning difference. And what it translated into for my staff was somebody that didn't care, that was very aloof, that thought I could do whatever I wanted. And I had to be vulnerable with my staff and tell them, I actually need your help. I can't remember these things. These are the things I'm good at. I'm really good at camper communication. I'm really good at problem solving. I'm great at emergency situations, and I love collaboration, but I'm not good at these other things. And I have to educate my staff every year, the young ones and the new ones, on who I am and my struggles. But on the flip side, I've had 17-year-olds sit down and write an email for me that I have to reach out to a parent because I just can't do it. And so in positive consequence, that 17-year-old now knows a little bit of the behind the scenes. I don't do anything alone, not because not because it's a choice of delegation, but because I do need that assistance. I need somebody to take the notes. I need somebody to have those ideas. And because of that, I feel like I have been able to develop delegation techniques. And in the things that I am talented at that come easy to me, it's easier, I find, for myself to delegate. We want to pause and look, and especially with our staff, and look at what's the long-term goal of this particular person. How am I going to get them from point A to point B? Where do I see them in 3 years from now? How are they going to be able to do their job? And how do you invite your staff members in on almost all of your decision making and the actions that you do, especially the things that you're quite good at, like answering emails at 4:00 in the morning, which I know a lot of camp directors are fond of doing, except for Chris.
4:00 in the morning.
Oh, I've gotten definite camp directors have been on committee meetings where I receive, there's messaging going back and forth between camp directors
4:00
at 4 in the morning.
No, that's another podcast.
But
You
I
have to
think
train
that
the parents. That's ridiculous. But sorry, go ahead.
I think that what we're looking at is, you're not going to be you're not going to be at your organization forever. So how are you building this team that you're role modeling to, that you're passing on the knowledge, you're passing on the experience, and you're passing on that framework? And that's not going to take a year. It's going to take 15 years of continuing that practice. But I've certainly learned on this podcast, CampHacker specifically, that one of the things I struggled with was being direct and getting to the point, and not being harsh with my staff, but really having a high expectation, but explaining it to them. And that I got from talking with Travis and with Joe and with Dan, especially Joe, and him having his expectations with his staff and how clear he was about, gray zones. There pretty much wasn't any gray zone. And that's something I really had to work on, because I really like pleasing people. And that's something that I realized was harming my staff and our team. And now they know where I stand. But that took a lot of practice.
I heard something at the ACA National last year, just before we all stopped traveling anywhere in the world. And one of the speakers was talking about the idea that we set the expectations high because we know you can meet them, right? And sharing that with your staff.
Yeah.
Gab, you brought up the point, right, that you don't do anything alone. And I think that's one of the ways not to become that boss, in my mind, to answer Chris's question, is to make sure that you hire people to fill your weaknesses, right? You hire people to be in spots. So I believe in black and white. And what I do is I hire camp directors who are people, more people oriented at camp, right? If you were to do true colors, I hire blue people to be camp directors under me, whereas I'm a green person and I just don't put up with crap, right? And I think that it's huge to when you're young, you're not going to be successful all the time, right? It's just not going to happen. And I think one of the challenges that we have as a society is that we've taught, I'm not sure, Chris, if this is the same in the States. I would have to believe that in North America, this is one of our challenges, is that we have allowed our high school students and university students to believe that they're super smart and will always get really high marks. And they're so afraid to fail because a high school student needs that high mark to get into their university or college of choice, right? And so they won't try new things. And being a leader is all about failure, right? It's sometimes that boss is the person who is always right and will never admit they're wrong. But to not become that boss, you need to really learn from your failures. And if we don't allow our staff to fail, they'll never become leaders who can become a good boss.
You know what you two have been talking about this entire time is
bosses?
Well, yes. But the key to not becoming that person is self-awareness. That's what we're talking about. Because everything that we're talking about is like, because this is when we've had bad bosses. That's the thing. They can't be told because they're not aware of how they're coming across, of the way that they're delegating. They're not aware of how they are interacting, period. which is interesting because when you talk about being a leader and leading, it requires a great deal of self-reflection and an
Yep.
observing eye. And I feel like this is something I always train staff, and anyone actually I encounter is like, well, how do you think you're coming across right now? Like, just take a moment and think about that. How did you want to come across? How do you think you're coming across? Self-awareness is key. And also, Gabby, you mentioned this earlier, like you have to tamp down on your ego. And I do this a lot by checking in with the mission. Like check,
Mm-hmm.
like, is this about me or is this about the mission?
Yeah.
Because if it's about me, that's great, but that's selfish and it's time limited and it's really small stakes if it's just about me. If it's about the mission, then this is going to make sense. Um, and then, I mean, this is the drum I will keep beating until I die. Intention, intentionality.
Sure.
Be really intentional when you are working on a project. You have to be really intentional when you are in charge of something. Every decision means something. Every decision reflects back on you, on the mission, on the agency or organization. And I can't tell you how many times I've worked under people who will say things in meetings like, we could do this or that. It doesn't matter to me. We could do either one. I don't care. And I was like, okay, first of all, whenever there's a choice, you should have an intention. Like nothing is a coin flip. You've got to be really clear. This happens. We don't have time to go into all of these examples, but it happens so often where people are like, this is fine, right? This will be enough. And I'm always like, well, what's your intention? Is your intention to be enough or is your intention to be successful and fantastic? Because there's a distance between those. Anyway, I'm just sort of synthesizing what you all are saying. I think self-awareness is definitely at the top with low ego and intentionality coming up behind.
I think that I recently had a conversation with my camp director in the past week about the idea that camp is a safe space, right? And especially for LGBTQ people and
Mm-hmm.
people of color who need that safe space. And what I said is we need to really make sure when they come, they know that it's a safe space, but it's not a coddling space. We are going to set the standards as employers and have them meet the standards. And so just because somebody said something that you find, that rubbed you the wrong way doesn't mean it's no longer a safe space. The world needs you need to adjust to both of those things. I think from the perspective of being a boss, you should never have to tell anybody you're their boss. Because if you have to say I'm your boss,
Oh,
then you are not being a great
yeah,
boss.
you already messed up if
You
you have
already
if you're
messed up.
backed into that corner. Yeah.
I really put it down to you are the keeper of the culture when you're a boss, and your what you do and what you say and how you act are what is going to make your camp, your business, your classroom, your school. That's what's going to make it succeed or fail, right? If you say one thing but do other things, or if you right, if you try to be their friend sometimes and their boss at other times. This is one of the reasons I always talk about the fact that being a boss, the loneliest job is being a camp director, um, because you're at the top of the heap, and as much as things roll downhill at camp, things don't go downhill because that's not right. What we teach our leadership team is that you can talk to people on the leadership team about things, but you can't talk to the counselors about those same things because you need to really keep your levels to make sure that everyone is on mission and on task. So it is yeah, it can be difficult, but I think that if you're the keeper of the culture, right, if you're the mantra, I've been thinking about mantras lately, and like life mantras, and and I don't know that I'm using the correct. When I say mantra, I'm fairly certain I don't have a Buddhist mantra. I'm just saying that this is what I believe. Um, and I worked with a boss who was challenging. And the mantra I came up with after my first summer at camp was or during that first summer was to affect positive change where one can.
Mhm.
And I think that when we're training people to deal with bosses, right, or when we're training people who might have one of those bosses, is to really do what you can if you believe in the mission of the camp. And I always judge that against, is it, are the decisions that boss is making unsafe, or are the decisions that boss is making just not what I would do if I was in charge? Because if they're not unsafe, right, if they don't bring camper safety or staff safety into question, then do what I can to affect positive change. But if it's unsafe, then I will argue till the day I'm dead, till the day I die, that we can't do these things.
It's disappointing though, right? That's the line. Like I find it disappointing because as directors, we are keepers of the culture. And sure, I just, there is
Yeah,
some distance between unsafe and unsavory.
but
And
as a
so, go ahead.
this is a huge difference between private camps
Mhm.
and nonprofit camps. Because at a nonprofit camp, if someone was doing something unsavory that I didn't agree with as an assistant director, I could then jump over them to go to a board member. Whereas at private camp, it really stops at the person who signs, right, everything and owns it.
Mhm.
And at that point, and I remember having this conversation with our a good friend of the show, Jason Sargent, and he worked for me for one summer, and he was pissed at the owner. Just couldn't wrap his head around the decisions. And I remember having a conversation saying, "Listen, if you can't do your job, then you need to leave. But
Yikes.
if you can do your job and affect positive change where you can, then get to work." Because we can't change those decisions that an owner has made. We
Mhm.
can only work
Yeah.
within the bounds we're given.
Yeah. Mm.
Well,
Yeah,
and
that makes a
that's the
lot of
right of an
sense.
employee. An employee that you're the power that you have is to stay or to leave, and the power that a boss has, as long as it doesn't go into the sphere of harm, is to run things the way they see fit. That's their business, and there's that accord. I think for me, like keeper of the culture, I think keeper of the culture in part is making sure that your staff and campers are part of that discussion, and you're holding all those conversations and teasing those conversations out to help with that community. And I think for creating a safe space, we can never create a safe space, but we can always strive to create a safer space. And the the back to that boss, I think that um, Chris, when you're synthesizing what Joe and I were talking about, for me, it really does come down to self-awareness. What is your motivation behind being in charge of a camp? What is your motivation to be working with staff members? I think a lot of camp directors, haven't thought it through, or it worked for them at one point in their life, but they haven't reevaluated and said, is this for me? How many camp directors go through their own process of um, choosing to go back to camp that summer? How many of them make that decision, or even have a fallback plan? Do they feel trapped? Are they part of a family business, or is this all they've known? I think there's reasons why people do what they do, but as adults, we have to be responsible in knowing that whatever our reasons are and our blind spots are, we have to try to eliminate those blind spots as much as possible, so we're not harming people because we're in positions of power. But who have you placed in your organization that can call you out on things that you trust and that you will listen to? Where have you created that space? Because a 19-year-old might stand up to you, and that's an exceptional individual, but the older you get, the more confidence you get. You're a powerful person that a lot of people have probably looked up to. So who is your person or people that can say, hey, I need to talk to you about this is not working
Mm.
well?
I was going to say building a strong feedback loop community and culture is key
Right.
to
Yeah.
avoiding falling into this trap.
Mm-hmm.
It's too often. I know at my camp, we have this culture of feedback. We give a lot of feedback down, to the assistant directors and to the counselors. But the admin team, like when it's time for us to give feedback to each other on the same levels, then it was very uncomfortable. And I was like, well, okay, well, hold on a second, everyone, because we can't do it down and not do it across, because in some ways that's even more dangerous for the reasons that you're saying. It's so important that we build feedback loops for ourselves. Even if you are a private camp owner and you're the only one, you've got to have somebody on staff, not a friend or a family member who is on staff, because that almost never works. Someone on staff not related to you, who you empower to call you out and challenge you, not in front of people, because, come on, this isn't a Fox drama, but in a way that is going to be constructive.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think that we're going to wrap this up over the next few minutes, but the idea that it's all self-awareness. I think I'm a better camp director now than every year I think I get better because I'm super awesome and amazing.
Of course.
But
hello.
Because you have more, maybe it's just me. I am what I read and what I do has me look at more what is self-awareness, right? The idea that I'm the keeper of the culture, but I'm also very conscious not to have my staff or campers go to the cult of the camp director, where you're more important than the camp, right? I talk to my staff about the idea that if I die on a Saturday, you know what's going to happen Sunday afternoon? Camp is going to start, because camp is more important than me, right? And that's and I will often remind people, they're like, what if this happens? And I was like, well, what if I die on Saturday? And they'll be like, oh, camp starts on Sunday. And you're like, wow, okay, great.
Your staff meetings sound morbid. Hey, everyone, just a reminder, if I die today, yeah, okay.
It's more, I don't bring it up every time. It's more the idea that camp is more important than any one person, right?
I get it.
That's the thing. And I think when I look back at those bosses, I think you can learn something from everybody. You can learn what not to do. You can learn what to do. You can, and I think that as we go around, I think that, yeah, if you want to learn how to do something, you just teach yourself how to do it. If you want to delegate more or do less, one of the things for micromanaging is the idea that, and I say this at least once or twice a summer, I said, well, if I wanted to be the program director, you know what I would do? I would make myself the program director, because I have that power, but I will let them program direct how they want to program direct, as long as it follows the framework that I put them in. So it's good. Any final thoughts on being that boss or how not to be that boss, Gab?
For me, when we're talking about having those people that can call you out, empowering them, that takes time, and that takes you being vulnerable. And I would start with things such as, hey, I know one of the things I'm working on is, micromanaging. I don't want to do it as much. I'd love to brainstorm with you on how we can, put that culture forward where we're building enough education in our staff so they are successful at what they're doing, but that we're also being elastic so that they can do it the way they want to do it. Can we problem solve how to do that? And I think it doesn't have to be these big declarations like, I want you to call me out, when, obviously being transparent is important, but build trust with that person or those people and make them part of your problem solving. Listen, we all struggle with certain things. It's okay to lean upon some of your staff members who are ready to, and say, let's problem solve this and let's figure it out. And it doesn't have to be necessarily a personal issue. Chances are is that this is something that a lot of people are struggling with in your organization, and getting to the root problem. Why are you micromanaging? Well, maybe it's a new team, and maybe a lot of them don't know what they're doing. So maybe there's a certain amount of hand-holding that's necessary, but there's other areas that we can let go and that we're comfortable with in letting go and letting experiences happen. So bringing people into your circle, helping them problem solve with things that you do not know how to solve on your own, is a good way of starting to build that trust.
And the prequel to that is doing some mission work for your organization. get everyone in a room and make sure that you all understand what the mission is, because all the communication and feedback is going to flow from there. Being able to hold a director or a boss accountable starts with everyone having a firm understanding of what the camp mission says and where we're going. I think that is really the building block of everything that we are talking about here today, as far as not being that person and or confronting that person. You really have to have a real good sense of where you are and where we're all going together, and why is this a bum note.
I think that's a good place to leave it. I think that we could talk about this for long. We could do another episode on
I
it.
mean, I feel like the three of us could talk about a lot of things for a long time.
Sure.
It's for the audience that we're cutting it here.
We could do a live. We could do like a live weekend stream where we just talk for
Sure.
Stream of consciousness.
24 hours to fundraise for kids in camp. So that would be amazing.
Man, that would be.
All right. So now it's time for Tool of the Week. This is a tool that you can use to become a better camp director. So why don't I go first as this week's tool? I am pulling out an old favorite of mine, which is a 5-gallon bucket full of possibility. If you're watching on YouTube, I've recently come into possession of a ton of stickers. And so I've realized it's a great way to decorate my bucket. But what a bucket full of possibility is this idea. And I had this in the early 90s. So I've had it for a while, not the same bucket. But when I did leadership training in high school and other things, what I keep in my bucket is just stuff that kids find entertaining, staff find entertaining. I can pull out and talk about. And if you know me, I can relate anything I pull out to leadership if that was the case. Like this Coca-Cola bottle that I got because I ran the torch in the Olympics in 2009. Did you not know this, Chris? Is this new to you?
Yeah, I'd never heard this story.
Dude, I can go get the torch in a second.
It's okay.
But yeah, so the bucket is really filled with stuff that really sometimes doesn't have a set purpose. You can keep food in it and other things. The reason we've gone to a 5-gallon bucket over like a trunk or Rubbermaid is that you can sit on them, right? You put the lid on, you have a built-in seat. Maybe 6 years ago, we gave all of our staff a bucket, and we didn't do the best job of communicating it. I'm going to reintroduce it with my staff this year, that if you want to entertain, here's the quick story, because I know my tools can go on a long time. Summer of 97, I was called, after I was a camp director at a camp, it was the summer of 98, I was called back to be a counselor at that same camp. And my camp staff who were there the year before and had returned were like, oh, you're going to see how hard it is to be a camp counselor. And I'm young enough that I was like, I love being a camp counselor. Like, I think I was 24. And I had a trunk full of possibility, just filled with yo-yos and magic tricks and books and other things. And my cabin was the most well-behaved, entertained cabin group. And they're like, we gave you all the good kids. I was like, take a look at who I have. These were all the ones who caused the most trouble last summer. And I relate to the fact that it's how you interact with those kids, and the bucket and trying to find kids' passions and things. That's really what this is about, is to put things in there that are just weird, awesome, and fun, and can reach out to other people. So that's mine, a 5-gallon bucket. You can buy them pretty much anywhere. If you want a white one and fill it with stickers, that would be super awesome. And if you have an O in the middle of your name, it can take up the middle of the bucket lid like this with a Captain America sticker on it. Gab, what is your tool of the week?
I have tool of the week, but this podcast inspired me to shift my tool for this week. So we'll include it in the show notes, but get yourself a therapist. I have a therapist. I chat with my therapist during the summertime on Zoom once a week. And this for me is really important because camp brings up a lot of feelings, a lot of stresses, and you need somebody from the outside that has perspective, that knows you, that can help guide you through things. And I can't tell you how many times where, not knowing how to deal with a staff member or with a situation. One summer, we lost 14 staff members in one summer. It was just like one of those trickle effect situations that happened. 7
Wow.
of them were completely out of our, um, had nothing to do with us, had to do with, family issues or school or, random things. But the other 7 were really because some of these young women left, it caused that trickle domino effect. And being able to process this with something that was outside of my circle was really helpful. And I also work with my family. So you want to be able to have a place to chat with somebody. And therapy has come a long way in the tech wise. If you're somebody that's not comfortable talking, maybe texting is something that's helpful. And there's texting services that are available. But if we're talking about self-awareness, having somebody that's a professional to help you reflect on why you're feeling why you're feeling the way you're feeling, and giving you a little bit of perspective, I find really helps me be a better camp director.
I co-sign really hard on that. That's cool.
That's awesome. Chris, what's your tool?
So, on the mental health tip, I am someone who suffers from seasonal affective disorder in the sense that when there is less light, I get slower and sadder, and it's harder to do everything. So one night I was watching Shark Tank, and this woman came on and pitched this thing, and I was like, I must own it. And it really works for me. The company was called Circadian Optics Light Therapy. But a lot of people make lamps like this. These are lamps that mimic sunlight. See, I'm going to turn it on. It's the evening now we're recording this, so it looks terribly bright. But you turn it on in the morning, it mimics sunlight, and it regulates your body it helps you sleep better, it gives you a better rhythm, and it lifts my mood. So if you are someone who can't not countenance the fact that the sun goes down at 3:30 p.m., then maybe you need one of these lights. It's made me more productive for sure. So I would recommend that.
That is
That's
awesome.
It. Yeah, I think so.
That's a great tool.
Mm-hmm.
I wake up to light. My alarm clock is a light clock.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. So,
all right. That is the show for today. I have an outro to do now. If you enjoyed today's show, we'd be grateful if you'd go to ratethispodcast.com/camp, ratethispodcast.com/camp. And we want to thank our editor and producer, Matt Hansberger, for helping us get this show out for you, and especially today's show where you might have to edit what we say and what we did. And you can find Matt's show notes in our past tools of the week at camphacker.tv/podcast. Right now, if somebody wants to follow up with you, Gab, how can they reach you?
They can reach me on Instagram, DM Gabrielle Rail. Rail takes 2 L's. And they can also check out where I work at ouareau.com, ouareau.com. And there's an email there as well if you'd like to reach me via the email.
Awesome. Thank you, Gab. And Chris, how can people reach you?
People can follow Camp Highlight at Camp Highlight on Instagram, or go to camphighlight.com, or they can follow me on Instagram at planetchris1, or you can email me at chris@camphighlight.com.
Thank you, Chris. And if you are interested at all in touching base with me, you can reach me at joe@yoyojoe.com, yoyojoe.com, or you can reach me at camp, so campisbetter.com. That's it for the show. Thanks for the evening, friends.